let's go ahead and let's talk about subtracting positive and negative numbers. So the way that I remember this, or at least think about it, is that when we have subtraction in mathematics, we actually, at a very high level of mathematics, define subtraction not as subtraction, but as adding the opposite, or adding an additive inverse. So let me explain what I mean there, and this might help you. So let's say we've got a number like 10, and we are subtracting 3. Now we all know the answer to this is going to be a positive 7. Okay. Another way of thinking about this is that this is really 10 plus a negative 3. So actually, like I said, at a more advanced level, subtraction really means adding the opposite. Okay, and so what we need to do is we need to take 10 and add it to negative 3. And if you go back and you think about the different methods for adding numbers together that we've talked about in a different video, you'll know right away here that this is going to be equal to positive 7. Again, you can think about this in terms, I'll do it the 3 ways that that I previously discussed, and then we'll move past that. But remember that when you're adding these things, the first thing you can do is you can think about it like money. So money is a great way to think about positive and negative numbers. Think something that's positive is money that you actually currently have. Maybe it's in a bank account, or it's up in a piggy bank, or it's in your wallet, whatever it happens to be. Purse. So negative is something that you owe someone else. So let's say I owe my my brother-in-law, I owe him $3. Okay, so negatives are what I owe. Positives are what I have. Let's just say have. Okay, now at the end of the day, we're going to settle up. What I mean by that, the term settle up just means that we're going to pay off what we owe as best we can, and that way we don't have any debts if possible. So since I have $10, but I owe $3, at the end of the day, I'm going to have a positive $7 still left in my account. Okay, so that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is in terms of a number line. We start at 10, and then a negative 3, adding the additive inverse of 3, will take us to the left by 3. So we're at 10, we want to go 3 to the left, so 1, 2, 3, like that, and that leaves us at a value of 7. And the last way to think about it that I discussed, and I like this way, I didn't come up with it, but I like this way, is that if you think about these in terms of like a game, so positive team at the end of the game or the end of the half or quarter or whatever it is, positive team has 10 points, negative team scored 3 points, that means positive team is ahead, so we know what our sign is, and they're ahead by 7 points at the half at the end of the game, whatever it is. Okay, so those are your ways of looking at it. So we can always take a subtraction problem and change it into addition. Okay. Another way that I want you to think about subtraction, and this is actually really important, is in mathematics, especially higher level mathematics like calculus, when we do what are called epsilon delta proofs, or really anything when we talk about absolute values and things beyond that. Subtraction, I'll write this down here for you. Subtraction is really distance between numbers. It is when we subtract 10 minus 3, we're asking how far away is 10 and 3 on a number line. Okay, so when I subtract, I've got my 10 and I've got my 3, and the question here is, what is this length? Now if we're doing 10 minus 3, our length is going to be positive. And you might say, well, you said before distance is always positive. So I'm going to put this in quotes because we can have negative values out in terms of this length, okay, depending on which way we go. So, but we know that between 10 and 3, that length is 7 long, okay? And so this idea of thinking about subtraction as how far apart are two numbers is probably a pretty good way of thinking about it in terms of applying subtraction to different problems. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at a couple different problems that involve subtraction, how to work with positive and negative signs. So let's go ahead and let's say we've got something like this. What if I have 10 minus a negative 3? Okay. Well, in that case, remember subtraction, we can change that into adding the opposite. Well, the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. So we can change this into adding the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3. I like to think about it like if you've got two of these minus signs in a row, they can come together to form a plus sign. So that's how I learned it, however many years ago. But really what's going on here in the background is when we subtract, we are adding the opposites of this. And remember, an additive inverse, or the opposite, is just the change sign. So if I've got a negative 3, I make it a positive 3. If I would have a positive 3, I would make it a negative 3. Okay, so it's that straightforward. But when you first start doing these, probably the easiest way to think about it is if you got two negatives in a row, they make a positive. And you can think about, I've got the two lines here, they make the two lines there. So this is going to be equal to 13. Again, when we think about distance, or how far apart are these numbers, I've got a 10, and now I've got a negative 3. So here's 0, right? And so it's going to take me to find the total length between those. Well, I've got to go up 3. There's 3 here. There's another 10 here. So in total, my length here is 13. Okay. Let's try another one. So what if we have negative 10 minus 3? Okay. Well, again, I'm going to think about this as plus a negative. So I'm going to think about subtraction as adding the opposite. So I've got negative 10 plus a negative 3. So if I owe you $10, and then, man, I don't have any money for lunch, and so you lend me another $3, at the end of the day, I still owe you $13. We can think about it in terms of the basketball team. The negatives score 10 points. They score another 3 points. Positives didn't score anything in here. There weren't any positives. And so at the end of the game or the quarter or half or whatever it is, the negatives are up by 13. So we get a negative sign and then we get 13 there. Okay. You can think about it as a number line. You can start at negative 10 and we're going to go to the left 3, which means we're going to be back at negative 13. Okay. So pretty straightforward there. Let's do a couple more. So far we've had a positive minus a positive minus a negative minus a positive. Well, what about a negative minus a negative? Okay. Well, again, I'm going to think about this as adding the opposite. So we'll go negative 10. These two are going to make a positive. So plus 3. I owe you $10. I earned $3 for mowing my parents' lawn. And I use that. So at the end of the day, I still owe, but I owe only $7 now. Okay, so I owed them $10. I did $3 worth of work. I still owe them $7. Again, basketball teams, the negatives score 10 points. The positives only score 3 points. So the negatives are ahead. So the negatives are ahead by 7. Okay, they've got the lead by 7. And that pretty much covers all of our different types of subtractions. So again, we've got a positive minus a positive minus a negative minus a positive, and a negative minus a negative. So those are all the different cases that I believe that we can have. Okay, so hopefully that helps you out just a little bit in clarifying in your mind how to go ahead and subtract numbers from one another. Again, if you didn't catch this whole idea of, quote, distance, that's all right, but kind of have it playing around in the back of your mind just a little bit. Because again, if I were to ask something like, how far away is negative 10 and negative 3, well, now it becomes a little bit different, right? In terms of answering that question. Whoops, sorry, not negative 3, positive 3. So I'm at negative 10 and positive 3. I've got my subtraction, so I'm at negative 10, and then I got to move all the way up to positive 3. I'm going to have to move 13 units, but you might say, well, why is it negative, right? And so that idea of, quote, distance can be a little bit confusing when your answers are negative. It's not confusing when your answers are positive, but it can be a little bit more confusing here. So anyway, but if you just follow what I've got here, in terms of changing everything into plus the opposite of what it was, you'll be all set to go. And again, think about things in terms of money or in terms of scores for a team, and you should be all set.